couple years ago, I built a 1974 CT70. I put a Piranha 140 engine in it. That motor came with a what I'm going to call like a pit bike style harness, basically a standalone harness that would run just the motor if you were putting it in a little pit bike style bike that you didn't need lights, things like that. I ended up using a factory CT70 harness and just marrying the two together. I learned a lot doing it. I had to buy a voltage regulator, rectifier. It came with a little pigtail. So I'm about to do another one. That bike is sold and gone, so I don't have it for reference, but about to do a couple more actually. I've got a 125, which is sitting here on the bench, and a 140. They were a little bit cheaper. I found them on Amazon. Sometimes they're cheaper on there, sometimes the shipping's ridiculous, so you just gotta pay attention to that. But they did not come with any kind of wiring harness. So I got on Amazon, I just typed in pit bike wiring harness, and I found these kind of little cheap harnesses. I'm gonna show you the issue with them. These kind of little crappy connectors, the way they've got these done, this all had tape on it at one point like this, and I unraveled it to look at it. So I went through it. Before I started this was connected. All the reds were going together, all the greens were going together in one block. The CDI box was the same way. The black and white was going to all these black and whites. The green was going to all the greens. So I determined what I needed, which was a CDI and the voltage regulator. I clipped everything off. Originally I was going to use these battery cables also, but I'm not running an electric start, so in an electric start scenario, that would go to your battery, and that would go to your starter relay or your starter solenoid. But I'm not using that, so set this aside. This is all I'm using now. So the way I'm going to hook this to this brand new factory CT70 harness I got. These are really cheap, by the way, too. If you're building a CT70 and the wiring's even remotely messed up, this thing's only like 30 bucks. Bart Moto sells them. I really like Bart Moto, so I reference them a lot. The guy's really helpful. He's really active on Facebook. He's always on there answering people's questions. I have bought a lot of stuff from T-Bolt in the past before, too. They seem like they're pretty responsive, too, but so anyway, factory CT70 harness. If you kind of think about this and compartmentalize it into like 3 different areas, your bike harness, your pit bike type harness stuff that you need to make the newer style motor run, because you're not using points and condenser and stuff anymore. This is all electronic, and then your engine wiring. So all this is going to hook together. It's pretty easy. You can Google Chinese pit bike wiring, and you'll find a really nice wiring diagram that'll show you the pin out for the CDI box and exactly what every wire does. I've seen a couple anomalies, like there's a black and red wire in this CDI box that in a lot of the wiring diagrams it just shows it as a red wire, but if you just look at what pin it's going to, that's pretty easy to figure out. So if you just kind of look at this, kind of wrap your head around it, I've got a CT70 wiring diagram I downloaded. This is a K3 1974 diagram. This is a K3 harness I bought. The reason I went with the K3 harness is because I wanted turn signals, and the blue and orange are your left and right turn signal. This is your headlight bucket area where all this terminates inside the headlight bucket. That's your ignition switch, and then this is the back of the bike. That would be your engine plug, so the yellow, green, black, and then the green with a red stripe was your engine plug. There's 2 plugs that are identical. The wires are different colors, but the actual plug is the same, where the female version would plug into either one of these. One of them is your battery, so the blue red with white stripe, and 2 blacks goes up to the factory CT70 battery, and then this is your factory CT70 engine plug. So you could really use either one of these the way we're gonna hook these in. I keep saying marry them together, but really you're just running these wires to where they need to go. So out of this voltage regulator rectifier, let's start with a motor. That might be easier once you start there. Your 2 yellow wires coming out of your motor are AC voltage, and if you have 2 yellows, it's a full wave rectifier. If you have a yellow and a white, it's a half wave. I actually was on one of the Facebook groups last night, and the guy was having issues trying to figure out, he had 2 yellows and his harness had a yellow and a white in it, and the guy from Bart Moto got on there and kind of squared him away and advised him that, you know, he had a pre-made harness that he'd bought, but he bought a half wave harness that had a half wave rectifier. So just, you know, do your research, know what you have. You know, I'm just showing you for informational purposes what I'm doing. So on a full wave, I'm going to send one of these to ground. I'll crimp a ring terminal on this and hook it to my motor mount bolt, which is exactly what I did on the last one I built. It was a Piranha motor, and it was also a full wave. On a half wave, you wouldn't send that to ground. You would hook one of them to one wire and the other one to the other wire. So on the full wave setup, since I'm sending one of these to ground, the other one, both these wires will run to that one wire. So I'll be sending AC voltage up to both of them. From what I understand, I've never done it myself, but if you run both of these in on a full wave, you're gonna start burning out bulbs and things like that. So these are your 2 stator wires. So these are sending voltage into your harness from the stator, and these 2 wires on this rectifier or voltage regulator are basically the voltage going into this. So with that being said, that's all we really need to worry about on these with the voltage regulator. We'll come back on the CDI box. But coming out of this is DC voltage coming out, so that's 12 volts DC, and then ground. So the way we're going to hook this in is you could run it in really anywhere you wanted to, but I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to mount this up close to my battery somewhere, so I will use this factory battery plug for my existing new 12 volt battery. So that red and white wire is the battery positive, and the blue is the battery negative, and that's the way it is from the factory as well. So I'm gonna take these connectors I bought off eBay. I almost said Amazon again, but I bought them on eBay. I bought them from this guy, Perry County Connectors. Pretty easy to find on eBay. I actually just looked before I started this video and purchased some more. PerryCountyConnectors.com is his website, but I believe these were listed as a old Honda stator connector. I messaged the guy. He wasn't necessarily familiar with CT70s, but he said he thought they would work, so I bought them and they did work. I used them on the last bike. So I'm going to pin these. You know, he sends you the connectors and everything to pin them with. So I'm going to pin these to where this red wire, I'll take this red wire and then obviously a larger gauge red wire, hook them together. I'll probably solder them and then crimp them in that connector and pin them to the appropriate pin on this plug to where they're going into that red and white wire. And then I will pin the appropriate terminal with, you know, a large gauge black wire going out to the negative side of my battery from that blue wire. Now in the CT70 harness and also the pet bike harness, all your grounds are always green. It's any of the solid green wire anywhere in this harness. So like on this key switch, that green wire, that's a ground. All of them are always green. I have no idea why they used a blue wire right there, but you know, if you download this wiring diagram, this is the plug where the that we're referencing there for the battery. That blue wire, I kind of hit on with a highlighter so that'd be easier to see, but that blue wire goes over, connects to a big bundle of greens, and basically just turns into green wires. So I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they didn't just make that another green wire. Maybe they did it to keep something square on the old setup, but that blue is part of your ground system. So I'll run that in the negative side of my battery. Red and white's the positive side. So back to this rectifier, we'll pin that into the red. We'll pin that green, can go in with that negative terminal, and then obviously a wire going out to the negative side of the battery. And then these two, I'll have to extend them out. I don't know if I'll still use these bullet connectors or if I'll, maybe buy another one of these and use it down on the motor. But both of these wires here will go down to one of these wires on the motor. And then, as I said before, the other one will just go to ground on the motor. So that'll be it. That'll take care of the voltage regulator. So I'll probably, where my battery box is, I'll probably just, maybe hook it to the bottom of my battery box with a strap, or on the side, or wherever I have room right around the battery somewhere in the CT70. So that takes care of that. I'll use that factory battery plug. Now the CDI box. What I'm going to do there, this looks a little more complicated, but it's actually pretty easy as well. This is your coil. So off the CDI box, that yellow and black wire is already pinned into the CDI box just the way it comes factory from the pit bike harness. So that yellow and black is the positive side of the coil. That green is the negative side of the coil. On the factory CT70 harness, the positive side of the coil is black, and there's not a negative side because it just grounds to the frame. I believe that's it. I would have to put a multimeter on it and ohm through it to see where it goes to make sure for sure, but I believe that's the coil wire on the factory CT70. But the same plug we were referencing earlier for the battery, those two blacks going in on the factory CT70, where this plug would hook in, these blacks basically just loop back to one end to the other. It's just literally a piece of wire that's pinned into both terminals like a little U. One of these goes to the coil for the positive side. So I will probably just hook that up just like that. I'll probably put a piece of black wire on there and just, pin it on both of them on my new setup. That way, if I have whatever I'm using that black wire in the harness for, that wire will still be able to be used if I need it for anything. So you could probably get away with not doing that as long as you know which one's going to the coil. I'm just going to hook it up the same way it was from the factory. So back to the CDI box. That is your coil, positive and negative. So you won't have to worry about your coil being grounded good to the frame or anything. It has its own ground. And then obviously here are your grounds. One's coming from the CDI box, one's coming from the other side of the coil. And probably what I'll do here is the factory coil sits down in kind of the bottom of the frame under the gas tank, kind of close to the motor inside the frame. So I will probably use this factory engine harness plug, and I'll hook both these greens together, solder them. Once again, crimp a terminal on them, use one of these to hook to this plug, pin it in the appropriate spot so that they're going to the green in the harness, and do it that way. These two on the CDI box, I said we'd go back to the motor for the CDI box, and that's what these two are going to. It's a black with a kind of a light red stripe on it, and then a blue and white. So on the motor, bring this over here. You have a black with a red stripe and a blue and white. So those are those two wires. They hook directly to here. So CDI box, the two with the bullet connectors go straight to the two of the corresponding colors on the motor. So that takes care of almost everything on the CDI box. You know where your grounds go, they go to the green. Anywhere in the harness, it doesn't have to be this plug. Like if you wanted to mount this up by the battery or somewhere, as long as you hook the green to the green in the harness, you could do that. I'm just choosing, this will probably be in about the right location inside the frame to mount this down by the coil. So that's what I'm going to do. So 2 greens are going to the ground. I'm going to pin them into the plug so it looks nice and neat when it's done. These 2 are going to go to the motor, and once again I might have to extend those down a little bit unless this reaches far enough into the frame. Kind of the anomaly here on the CDI box that doesn't match any of the colors in the CT70 harness is the black and white. So in the pit bike configuration, most of those pit bikes, you just have a kill switch, and all the kill switch is doing is sending ground to this black and white wire. So when you ground this pin on the CDI box, it shuts it off, it kills it. So if you look at your CT70 harness, your wiring diagram, Honda did the same thing. So all these blacks that I just drew on them a little bit with Sharpie to make them more bold. But you see this black coming down, this is your ignition switch, and this is the chart that shows you what each one of these pins does. So you can see with the key in the off position, the E and the IG are connected together. So this is that black is your IG terminal, and this ground symbol here, that's your E. So when the key is in the off position, it's basically connecting these 2 terminals together, so it's sending ground, it's grounding that black wire. So that, in the factory CT70 configuration, your ignition coil was on a black wire, so it was grounding that system, so it would kill it. So you're doing the same thing here on the CDI. So if you want to use that factory CT70 ignition switch, which is what I'm going to do, that black and white wire, if you hook it into black anywhere, so for instance on this engine harness plug, that black right there, I'm going to wire this black and white into one of the terminals on this plug, so wherever the appropriate pin would go, I will run that into that slot, crimp a terminal on it, put it in, and that will basically connect that black into all my blacks inside the harness. And then, once again, like I said, my greens will be going to my greens, my black and white will go to my black, and then whenever I turn my factory ignition switch off, it will send ground to that wire through the blacks, and it'll ground that pin in the CDI, which will turn it off. So that'll take care of the CDI. The only thing I'm doing different really than what I did before on the other bike, the one I keep referencing that I put the Piranha motor in, is on that one, on this yellow wire, the first setup I ran power off the stator straight into that yellow wire, so back to the voltage regulator. So when I ran that one wire up, I connected these to it, but I also pinned it into this plug to where it would run power up to the factory CT70 harness the way it was from the factory. That's actually how Honda did it from the factory, is they ran that AC voltage up that yellow wire. So that yellow wire, when we go back to our wiring diagram, let me find my highlighter, my yellow highlighter kind of turned orange on this paper, but this is the yellow wire coming through this plug off the stator. It comes up, it goes over to the ignition switch, to, I believe that says C2, it's kind of blurry on this paper, yeah, C2, which C2 basically connects to the HL terminal. So HL comes over and goes over to, it splits off to your, to a status bulb. But it goes to the headlight switch. So long story short, that yellow wire is running voltage to your headlight. So Honda, the way they originally did this is they were running They were running the headlight off AC voltage. So that's why on a lot of the old ones, you know, when you rev the engine, the headlight gets brighter and it gets dimmer as you're revving the engine. So I did have, on the previous bike, I did have an issue where I went through I was running all LEDs, and I went through some LED bulbs, and I finally ended up putting a resistor on one of them I kept having trouble with, and it solved my problem. But in a comment section on Facebook, the guy was asking a similar question about half wave versus full wave, and the guy from Bart Moto got on and made a comment, and he suggested in the scenario that we're talking about here that you run all your lights off, your DC 12 volts out of your voltage regulator. And I thought that was a pretty good idea. I'm gonna try it out anyway and see what happens. So I'm not gonna run the AC power to that pin like I did before. So probably what I will do is jump off that red wire system and run over to this yellow pin a red wire into it to send DC voltage up to that same circuit in the factory CT70 harness to run my headlight off of DC 12 volts. So, you know, the way you could achieve that is, you know, where we were talking about hooking this red into the red and white for the battery, you could either just jump off that and run a wire down into the system, or you could find another, you know, random spot on the harness where you have red coming in. For instance, right here, I believe that was for, let's see, factory CT70 red and white, and a green was the silicone rectifier. So it was part of the ignition system on the old stuff. You're not going to use that on this new electronic system. So, you know, stick your test light in there, make sure you got power. Let's see, is it connecting to red and white? Red and white, yeah. So that wire connects to the same red and white here. So these are connected inside the harness. So that will definitely have 12 volts DC on it. So, you know, in this scenario, you know, you could plug into that and run it down to this yellow. You could pick it up from that red wire, which is probably going down to your, you know, your brake light switch or something of that nature. Anyway, I'd have to figure it out. Yeah, that's going to the flasher. They call it a winker relay. And then your rear brake light switch. So, you know, you could tie into that side of it and run power down to that yellow pin. But however you get the 12 volts DC down there, you know, if you run it into that yellow wire, when the factory CT70 key switch is in the second position, it will send 12 volts DC up that yellow wire and power your headlight. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try it out that way. You know, if I end up having any battery issues, charging issues, anything like that, you know, at some point I could always pull the red wire out and jump another yellow into it off this stator and go back the same way I had the other bike. The other bike worked. Like I said, I just had a little bit of issue with some LED bulbs. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not overly complicated. I know, you know, when you're kind of start looking at some of this stuff, it gets a little confusing going from the old 6 volt points system to a newer 12 volt electronic system, but these are really all you need. Kind of wrap your head around the motor wiring. Like I said, you know, 2 stator wires, figure out yourself if you have half wave or full wave. There is a way you can use a multimeter and set this camera down. You can put one side of your multimeter on this wire and then run the other side to the case on the motor. And if it grounds, I can't remember if that's half or full. Google it for yourself, but there's a way you can test it also if you're unsure with a multimeter. You can do a little research on it yourself, but mine is a full. So like I said, I'm grounding one. The other one's going to those 2 yellow wires. Black and red and blue and white are going straight to the CDI box. Green is ground. One thing I have seen before too that I'm going to mention, and I know this sounds kind of silly, but I actually saw this on this has been a long time ago, but I saw a guy, he had a motor very similar to this, and it has this weird green plug on it. And if you look at that CDI box, it has that same weird green plug on it, and they are the same plug. It plugs right into that CDI box. I saw a guy that bought one of these. He was trying to put it in an old bike. Couldn't figure out why it wasn't running. That is not for your CDI box. That plug is a gear indicator. So if you have a motor that has that plug on it, that is a gear indicator. That is not your CDI box. So a lot of these don't have them when you buy it, but if you look at this little round circle with this little hold down strap, that's going to your gear indicator. That kind of light green with the red stripe on it is going to be your neutral light. So if you want to use your factory neutral light on your CT70 gauge, you would hook into that. You just find it here, probably deep in it. And on the factory CT70 harness, you have a green with a red stripe. That is your neutral light. So that same plug, your engine harness plug we were talking about earlier, that's the neutral indicator light. And it runs up, I got the wrong end, it runs up the front. So green with red stripe, that would go to your neutral indicator light up on your gauge, up by your headlight bucket. So that's pretty much it. It's actually pretty easy when you get the wiring diagram in front of you and you start looking at, you know, for instance, for me, the kill switch, you know, once I figured out that all the blacks were grounded inside the key switch on the off position, and I figured out that that CDI box is doing the exact same thing. It's just grounding that black and white wire to shut it off, and you know, you can run that into the black on this harness, and then, you know, the old factory Honda wiring harness is already doing the work for you. So this is only $30. This pit bike harness, has been a while since I bought it. I've had this sitting around for a while, but I want to say it was like $25 or something. You can buy this voltage regulator with a pigtail on it separately. I'm not sure if Bart Moto has those on his website, but you know, you could probably message him and see. But you know, you can get on Amazon and just buy some cheap little harness like this, and then you got your CDI plug and your voltage regulator plug. And then if you are running an engine with an electronic start, you know, you could use these two battery cables on your battery. I'm actually about to put a few of these together. This oh, I picked up the wrong bag. This is a parts bag, but I am using I'm building probably about 3 of these at once. One of them I'm putting a ZS 212 in, and I'm actually gonna kind of do that one for myself. Let me grab the bag real quick. So this one I purchased. This is from Bart Moto once again. I purchased this pre-done harness from him. And when I bought that 212, they just had a kit. You know, you got so much off if you bought it all as a kit. So I bought the motor, the wiring harness, carburetor, I think air cleaner and stuff came together. So I mean, that's an option. I'm running kind of aftermarket hand controls and things like that. So you know, all these, that's what these are going to, your hand controls and things. So it's, you know, a little more cumbersome than the factory harness. I have used one of these before, same style harness, not, let me preference that and say that the one I used before was not from Bart Moto, but you know, I'm sure all these are made in a similar factory somewhere. I built one for another gentleman, put a 140 in it, electric start, whole 9 yards, had a nice fancy little LCD gauge that had a gas gauge in it, and I ended up modifying the tank and putting a gas gauge, float for a gas gauge and stuff in it for this guy. And one problem I had is the bike was running and it would just randomly shut off. And I finally discovered, had the bike apart about 3 times. I had the wiring harness kind of pulled and laid over the back of the bike and had it running. And where the CDI box plugged in, I just actually happened upon it by accident. I bumped the CDI box and the bike turned off. So I bumped it again and the bike started back up, and I could sit there and just go like this. And finally I figured out that, you know, by wiggling the plug, that's what was doing it. So I discovered that some of these pins in here, I don't know if you can really see them on the camera, but you know, that pin is just like a female and a male version going together with a metal pin going in it. And inside that female side, there's just like a prong that's bent down that when you put the male part in there, it pushes on it. Well, the prong was bent up. So I ended up de-pinning the plug, bending it down with a little pick tool I had, and sticking it back in the plug. And then once I did that, I had several wires I had issues with. Once I did that, everything was fine. So just, you know, these guys that are selling these harnesses are not building them in their garage. These are built, you know, in a factory in China somewhere. So just keep that in mind, you know, when you buy these. Not all of them are built on a good day. So just be willing to, you know, hopefully, you know, this one will just work great and I won't have any issues with it. But past experience, I did have one I had a hard time with, and it caused me some grief. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, get yourself a wiring diagram, download it, look at it on your phone, whatever you want to do. Kind of wrap your head around the factory wiring versus the aftermarket CT70 or pit bike wiring. And I'll probably do this again once I get this all put together. I just kind of wanted to be able to show you the colors of the wires and everything before I get it taped up, because once I crimp these connectors on, and you know, I'll probably use solder and heat shrink. But you know, in the past I have used these. They look like a butt connector, but they have a little blob of solder in the middle. I've used these in the past with pretty good success too. So these, you know, outer parts heat shrink down. So you stick the 2 wires in there, heat it, and that solder melts and solders the wire, and then this heat shrinks down. And then I've got a roll of black heat shrink that I'll put over top of it just for weatherproofing. Something like that, you know, slide over the wire before you put it in that butt connector, and then once it shrinks down, put it over it and heat it. So it'll probably be that kind of scenario. So I didn't want to have all of it covered up, and I could actually, you know, talk about this in pretty good detail. I've actually messaged several people on, you know, comments and things that are doing similar. And you know, this is pretty easy. I don't know why more people don't use that factory harness, but anyway, that's pretty much it. I'll probably come back and do a slight little update on this later on once it's all put together, but I might even refilm the whole video again. I don't know.